How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I'm fantastic. So, what do you think the Safe Banking Act does, Michael? Does it do
I'm
all
an
of the
all of the
above?
above guy. Do I still get the newsletter?
You know what? We'll get you signed up for that newsletter, Michael.
Awesome.
You're here sharing information with our investor community. We'll definitely get you signed up.
Perfect.
So we have three people. Most people think it's all of the above. I'm going to keep the voting open for maybe a minute longer. But Michael, I'm going to turn it over to you, sir, and let you go ahead and get started on your presentation.
Perfect. Thank you. So I'll just do a brief introduction. MMJ is a listed investment vehicle listed on the ASX and the CNSX in Canada. We invest, or our history was that we invested in primarily federally legal cannabis companies. My background is I was originally a clinician, moved into healthcare investment banking around the world from a bunch of top 5 bulge bracket firms, and then began as a founder of a company called DoseCan that was bought by, which is now Uxley, and got associated with the MMJ group, who was the lead investor to that. I'm the managing partner of Parallax Ventures, who's the sub-advisor to MMJ Group's portfolio. Today, I'd like to just talk about a couple things, primarily focus on just what's happening in the industry and what we see. We tend to look across the global sphere, so Canada, the United States, Europe, the rest of the world. What we've really seen in Canada over the past 12 months is really an industry that was built almost backwards. So because it started with the medicinal industry, which is really the highest cost portion of the cannabis development, it really, as the regulations became less strict, we moved into farther and farther down the road in less costly ways to eventually being to growing cannabis outdoors, as we're doing now. What that resulted in was a lot of the companies had cost structures that just didn't work. So a lot of those companies have worked through that over the past 12 months. They've gotten costs down. They're now relatively heading towards profitability for some of them, but they remain federally legal, so good investments for us if we pick the right spots. The United States has been a bit of an area that we've been following for a while, but we had assumed that there was going to be, like probably many other people, the legalization to accelerate. We're starting to feel now like it's not going to happen, probably for a little bit over the next 2 or 3 years. So we're tending to trade away or not look at the MSOs, just as we can't really invest in those specifically. We think they're great businesses, but it just doesn't fit our mandate. And then as you look at Europe and the rest of the world, they really seem to be following the United States and the FDA and what the opinions and laws are eventually going to be. So we've really kind of focused on what would be considered the medicinal opportunities in those areas, whether it's Australia, Germany, etc. And those have been doing exceptionally well for us. Our mandate originally was to focus on only cannabis companies, but we've opened that up a little bit over the last 6 months as the mandate has broadened. So we do have some options to go outside of the cannabis. What we are really doing is we're focusing on areas that we understand and believe that both from a mandate and where we see the industry going, we can deal with. So what that really has meant for the portfolio is we've really focused on established brands. So from our perspective, that's tended to be brands that are either within Canada or brands that have a strong presence and they can provide a framework as legalization takes place. And I'll talk about a couple examples in the portfolio. We've also really focused on bottlenecks. Early in the cycle, we were large investors in the extraction space around the globe. We're first investors in DoseCan, first investors in MetaPharm, because we really understood that a lot of the 2.0 and 3.0 products need to go through that extraction process to come out the other end. So we'll continue to focus on those areas in the United States where we see them, as well as in the rest of the world. And it really does follow a pretty consistent pattern as legalization takes place. And so we do know the spots where we want to put money to work. And then, as I said, we're focused on a couple other high growth areas. So one of those being protein enhanced food. So The world is clearly changing, diets are changing. So we're focused on finding companies that are, again, either established brands or they really focus on a bottleneck or some sort of interesting IP. Healthcare, my background is 25 plus years, I hate to say it, in healthcare. So we're really focusing on now the post-COVID world and the changes that are happening in the healthcare system. So focusing more on telemedicine and other areas as opposed to focusing on specific therapeutics. And then lastly, the green initiatives. So there's a lot of money around the world being pushed into that. I think if we can find the right areas to invest in, all the way from commodities to finished products, then that will do well for our investors. Just talking a bit about some of the interesting portfolio companies. As myself and my partner took over the portfolio about 13, 14 months ago, the largest position was a company called Harvest One. It was not a great thing to take over at that time. The company had gotten themselves into a bit of a situation. They had 19 million of accounts payable. They had a large burn at 3 million a month, and they really didn't have a lot of cash. They took a 12-month process in terms of a strategic review and really just focused on divesting all of those non-core assets and really aligning as a focused CPG company. I'm happy to report now that most of those payables have been worked through. The company completed a financing about a month and a half ago, so it's well financed. But more importantly, now it has a platform with two key products, one being Dream Water and one being Live Relief, that both can be used as the expansion into the US, which I talked about before. But they've really created a network of 50,000 plus storefronts, whether it's Kroger's or Rexall's or Shoppers in the United States and Canada. And we think this is going to be either a really high growth avenue for investors as this company takes off through this year, or potentially a pretty interesting takeover target. And we've seen some precedents with Afria taking over Sweetwater, for example, not so much for their cannabis distribution, but for their just massive distribution in general. Weed Me is post the Redecan transaction, I believe is now the largest private LP in Canada. Again, a very interesting situation that we took over where the founders worked through some issues, both in burn and ramping up sales, and they've done exceptionally well, moving into their capacity, and I think they're doing well above $1 to $1.5 million a month. So we're again expecting that one of the larger LPs, whether it's in Canada or some of the Europeans, will take a look at this as both either a great bolt-on with really established brands and ramping sales, or just an entrance point into the Canadian market. Embark Health is an extraction company focused on brands again. So it has some excellent products based out of British Columbia. These products are really focused on 2.0 products as an extraction company. So it's now selling in all 5 provinces. The sales are rapidly ramping up, and we believe this is going to be just a great winner, whether it's taken out or it just continues to ramp sales through the year. Embark's unique in the sense that the management team has worked hard to take advantage of the opportunities they have, and they've given investors a couple interesting things. The first one is a company called J Supply Co., which is an Ontario retailer. It's now ramped up to doing almost a million a month in terms of sales and expanding rapidly. This franchise is going to have, I believe, over 23 stores in Ontario by the end of the year. So investors are kind of getting that for free as they're getting Protein Quest, which is a protein enhanced company focusing on the extraction capabilities of Embark, but in hemp seed. And so generally what you see with hemp foods in general is the difficulty to pull out the chlorophyll of the hemp really provides you with a green-like protein and a green oil that's really only good for putting onto salads and other things. These folks have managed to figure out a way to create both a golden oil, which is good for cooking, as well as a white protein isolate. This company is just getting taken off right now and working with strategics in terms of their next step forward. And lastly, I'll talk a little bit about Bespoke Capital. Bespoke is one of our first investments outside of the cannabis space. We were early investors in the seed round of this company, with a large stock position as well as a relatively large warrant position. I believe their last vote for the SPAC is today, June 4th, and it will start trading next week. This is a group focused on vintage wine. Probably all of the people here on the call have at some point in time actually partaked in their products. For us, it was really a decision based on the management team, which was led by a gentleman named Paul Walsh. He took Diablo from a $7 billion company to a $70 billion company. This company is based on how the SPAC unrolls, is going to have about $330 million. And it also just completed a private placement with Wasatch for an extra $100 million. So we believe that this is going to just be a huge component going forward. And we think that the management team has a ton of acquisitions that are going to be very accretive as we go forward. So that's about a general overview about the portfolio. And I'm happy, Elliot, if you'd like to take some questions and we can walk through specific items.
Absolutely, man. Super interesting. Your first investment outside of the cannabis space is the beverage space, which of course has been a massive topic within the cannabis space. So I'm not going to lie, it makes me wonder if you're planning something.
Well, listen, this is a very accretive management team here that's building out a massive operation. It's cash flow positive and EBITDA positive. It's just a great business that they've managed to put together. And for us, it was really, you could just see taking a great business that already had a great management team and overlaying all the experience that Paul and his group brought together. We feel like they're going to have access to capital, which is obviously going to be super interesting for them. And they've already proved it. They haven't even closed the SPAC transaction and they've brought in another $100 million. And at the same time, we think that they've probably lined up a variety of accretive transactions, which is exactly what Paul did as he grew Diablo from a $7 billion company to 70. So for us,
no small number.
Well, listen, we're happy for him only to take it to 7 billion. That would be just fine with us. and for us, because we're ARC investors, so essentially the risk capital that dealt with the early part of the SPAC, we have an oversized position in warrants. So as this thing moves higher, our position almost goes exponential just as it continues to move up. So we're really confident about that.
You have investments in both private and public companies. So I'm curious, how do you assist companies that would like to enter the public markets? Is that something you deal with? Is that something you help with, or even advise?
So I was a former banker, as was my partner, who's now spent a number of years now on the fund management side. So I tend to work pretty aggressively with the companies. Whether it's a Harvest One situation that requires a complete sort of restructuring and recapitalization, or whether it's a company like Embark, which is heading out into the public sphere and just needs some assistance outside of banks. We really tend to shepherd these companies and try and avoid the bad seeds and introduce them to relatively good participants in the market.
I love that. I mean, you are an active investor, which I always, respect and admire. So I guess as we are looking at your portfolio and the growth of your portfolio, are all these companies focused or listed in Canada or focused in Canada? I don't think Harvest One is, but I would love your insights on that.
So we really take a global look at the world, and because Canada was first in terms of the legalization process, it all kind of works the same, whether you're Australia, whether you're Germany, whether you're United States. It's just the speed at which it happens. So our investments, I would consider, are in Canada's Western worlds, really. So that's really for us, Canada, the United States, Western Europe, and Australia. And in Europe, it's really medicinally focused, as is Australia. Whereas in Canada and North America, it's really been extraction focused, which has been a big bottleneck. And now we're focused really on those brands where if you look at a good example, and frankly, it's become clear to us that really a lot of our companies are big enough to be really good key add-ons for some of these larger companies. So if you look at a Harvest One, it has, I can't remember the exact number, but it's over 50,000 storefronts. And that includes where it sells Dream Water, which is its lead product, and Live Relief. So if you're a company that's either in Europe, Australia, or in Canada looking to create that network as we head into the US federalization and legalization, then it's a great takeout candidate, because you could immediately start to fire through CBD products and other things. And then when legalization happens, snap, you're there to go. Because I think a lot of people, and this is probably not a popular opinion, as the MSOs continue to build here, that they're only state legal. So eventually, as the federal legalization comes together, there's going to have to be some sort of unwind, or some sort of something is our expectation about those processes. And we saw it in Canada, because essentially a lot of the legacy products had to transition into another area. So we're a little curious how the whole MSO process is going to happen, how FDA is going to get involved in the whole federalization. So we're trying to stay away from that area right now, just as there's not a ton of clarity. And don't get me wrong, those businesses certainly are blowing off money right now, but that's really because there's not a lot of participants outside that really specific group. Fair enough. For us, those companies are just not takeover candidates by anyone large for a while. If we were to invest in something that size, we would pick a Canopy, which is not necessarily a better business, but it's federally legal and it has more options and better paths forward for investors like us, right?
Fair enough, Michael. That's really good insight into your investment strategy, what you're looking for, where you're looking for it. And for anybody looking for, I think, an interesting portfolio, look no further than MMJ. I gotta say, man, the vintage wines, I'm waiting for that cannabis wine. That's awesome. I said it before. I know you didn't hint towards anything. It's just Elliot hinting toward it. But
when you look at a company that's in our portfolio like Embark, that's focused on nanotechnology, and it already has drop-ins for a variety of other products, the formulation work and other things for this, it's not that complicated. So whether it's for them or for someone else, these products are coming, and they're coming really fast. And the quality of the products in this next generation is just going to be shockingly better than what you saw the first iteration.
All right. Well, I claim the IP and the idea. Totally
you can be the tester.
Yes, Michael, I'll take it. I'll take it. Done.
This is a really strong one, Elliot. We brought it just to you.
Yes, I love it. Awesome. Michael, it's been a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much for being here. mmjgh.com.au, bringing the Western cannabis scene to Australia in good fashion. Much appreciate you being here.
Cheers, Elliot. Have a great day.
You too.